mean, my whole life I wanted to get out of Colombia.
Right. Still.
And then, I mean, even even now, like, want to.
Like, my backup plan is to like go off to some island or some like something on the equator and like be a bartender and sing like karaoke or cover songs.
I'm good with that. Like, that sounds like a fine life.
Yeah, no doubt.
I wouldn't be so bad. But
That's
I mean, I think for the most part, I was looking to try to get out of here. And even when I was out of here for a couple of years, right, even in the upstate, not even super far away, I think there was a point in my life where I was choosing between like going out to the West Coast and then this other opportunity in the upstate. Like, I could have been completely opposite side of the country and chose to stay relatively close or whatever, which ended up being one of the best decisions I ever made in my life. But I think the main thing is, like, as much as I wanted to impact outside of Colombia, I started to realize the capacity for impact in a place where you've got so many roots and connections and people that you know. Like, the capacity for impact is huge. And what do you want more? A larger or a deeper impact, or like this surface level? Now, I'm not saying like if I would have gone on and done things outside of, South Carolina or Colombia that it wouldn't have been impactful or whatever. But I'm just saying, like, I started to realize more and more, some people are called to go other places and impact, but maybe, my story, at least for right now, was to impact where I'm at. Well, it's always to impact where you're at right now. Always impact where you're at. So, like, even if I don't find myself forever in Columbia, South Carolina,
wherever I'm
here.
Impact.
So impact right now. But yeah, it's, I think the hardest part is we all see the end result of processes, and we think that's where we deserve to be. That's where we should be. Maybe deserve and should are the same thing, but just like I could do it better than the people who are in this spot or whatever. But we never really look at the process in which what got
actual
people there.
Journey that
like,
it took to get to
like,
seeing what you're seeing.
And I've quoted this a couple of times, at least today, whatever. But Outliers, in the book Outliers, Malcolm Gladwell talks about a couple of different people throughout. And they're not only the extraordinary opportunity in terms of like the timeline in history in which they intersected with,
right?
But I think it talked about, what was done up until that point. It talks about this whole idea of like this 10,000 hour rule where you become like, if you're spending 10,000 hours on something, you become some sort of master or whatever. People look at the Beatles and they see everything basically post 1960. The Beatlemania, craziness, stadiums full, people going crazy. But he talks about, and I don't even know if he specifically calls it this, but I kind of called it this, the Hamburg trials, where like they went to, I believe Hamburg's in Germany, if I'm not mistaken on my geography. They went to this place where they basically played 7 days a week for like almost like 8 hours a day, I believe, or something like that. And they pretty much learned how to be performers in this time. They went a few times back to Hamburg and went for little stints, and they learned how to be performers. So then all of a sudden they got their chance. It might have been on the Ed Sullivan Show. I don't really remember what show. It was some big show back then. But people look at them and they're like, oh, maybe they criticize like, well, these lyrics aren't hard. They're not really that good. But to be able to perform with the cameras in front of you without nerves, to be confident in your ability, like,
it takes a lot.
It takes a lot, and it wouldn't have happened without.
Totally. And how many times were they in there with nobody in there, and they were singing to nobody?
They played in front of drunks. They played in front of this. They played in front of that, and like people weren't listening to them.
Yeah, like not at all. They were just going about their lives and like not even understanding that you were doing something that like is bringing you the most joy.
Exactly.
And like
he even talks about Bill Gates and how he ended up creating Microsoft and everything like that. But he went to a school that was up the street, I believe, from the University of Washington. Outside of Seattle, in the state of Washington, and he was able to learn on one of the I don't even know 5-10 computers that could do the things that they could do in the country, and he was able as a high schooler to spend time learning that, and then all of a sudden
it put him at it with an advantage.
He was able to put hours in to understand, and then this extraordinary opportunity came, but it wasn't because he sat around
just waiting for the opportunity,
right? And even to pivot to another Malcolm Gladwell book where it's like David and Goliath, right? People always hear especially in sports or in other stuff, this underdog story, this
Right.
person who was very unlikely to overcome this incredible obstacle, but then you forget about, or people don't realize, even the story specifically in the scriptures of David and Goliath, what David went through before he even faced a giant. You know?
Right.
I mean, killed lions, killed
Tigers and bears.
I didn't want to say all that, but like,
Just
you know what I'm
lions
saying?
and
Like,
bears, right?
I believe it was
A
just
lion and a bear.
Yeah, I believe that.
All right.
I don't know if there were tigers involved, but
No, I think that's.
but I think the whole idea is like, yo, this guy, he was a young kid, right? He had a lot of faith and belief in something greater than himself, right? And he had this crazy faith, but he was straight up battle tested
Right.
in terms of when it wasn't like this kid was just like, oh, I'm gonna go throw some rocks and I'm gonna hit this guy and knock him out. You know what I mean? This is a kid who's like, yo, I took on a freaking lion. What? Like, I took on a bear. Like, I ain't scared of this dude.
What?
I'm just saying, like, we look at it in terms of this crazy underdog story, or like, hey, they got lucky in this
We
moment.
watch the highlights, and
But we
think
totally
got,
discount
like, the footnotes,
and it goes back to the shadow work.
Yeah.
It goes back to the stuff that they did when no one was looking. You know what they, and what that allowed them to do and be when the opportunity came. They stayed ready,
right.
so they didn't have to get ready. And then all of a sudden, this opportunity came, and they're there, and they become heroes or moguls or whatever it may be. But then
I think you just like saying the word moguls. You said that. I know, because in the book he talks about what the Rockefellers or like.
Well, he talks about specifically a certain amount of wealth
Like-
in the country of the United States. Like, I think
Was created
like within
or-
a span of a certain
Yeah.
amount of years, because like
The
it was a
industrial.
country being created. So you
Yeah.
had railroads, you had all this stuff.
People
and,
made a lot of money,
But
right.
I mean, all that to say is like, people look at this end product and they're just like, oh, how lucky of them. But like the work that people
Well, our
put in.
brains also tell us like, oh, that's easy. I can do that. If we see the end result, like our brain
Sure.
already like it almost like it convinces us that like that's easily attainable. When it's like, if we know anything about society pre-technology, is that nothing in this world is like easily attainable. Look at like the process through which seeds grow and like how things happen and like storms come and all, like nothing is just like, oh, this is just easily happen. So
Or
like
how-
it takes
how
time,
buildings were
work,
built.
and effort.
You know what I mean?
Buildings. How deep do you have to go to even go get something up?
Travel.
all the stuff that goes in between it. It's way more
Like, we hear about the Wright brothers and the airplanes, but we don't hear about all the failures up until it.
You talking about Palm Point Langley?
Sure, I'm not talking about that, but that's what I'm. But sure, if that's a failure up into it, like,
He
what I'm
was
saying?
one of the guys. He had the most money. You never seen that thing, The Golden Circle, with Simon Sinek? Samuel Pierpont Langley. He had the most money, the best nines, and like everything that he could. And the day that the Wright brothers took flight, he quit because he wasn't chasing. The whole point was it wasn't his why. He was doing it for the money, the fame, and the glory. The Wright brothers were doing it because they thought they were fundamentally changing how we live our lives. Is what Simon Sinek said. In the
Sure.
thing. So like, but that whole point is like, people don't buy what you do; they buy why you do it. It's the whole purpose.
Like, I mean, and history only really remembers the winners in terms of like
And
how
who
they tell
tells
the
it, and,
story
like, certain
and
people who
stuff.
tell
I
it,
mean,
and that's a
you don't
whole-
forget, or you don't really remember unless you were a fan of that team or a fan of the sport.
Yeah, the loss
who
in the-
lost in the World Series or who lost in the Super Bowl
Fair.
or the NBA Finals. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
10 years from now, they'll just know the Golden State Warriors won the championship. People might forget, unless you're a diehard sports fan, that the Boston Celtics played in it. And you know what I mean? It's just things like that. Like, people hardly forget the other people that were in on that story, So, or what it took to even get there, right? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I could make sport references all day.
I
in
know. I
terms
think
of
you
that.
should avoid the sports.
Why? I'm
I'm
not-
just kidding, man. You're
I'm just
fine.
saying, like, you look at it in terms of the journey of, let's say, even my football team, right?
Right.
If the expectation is to win a championship, this isn't just like something that starts in August.
Right.
This is something that, all right, come winter workouts, if you're not playing another sport, you're in the weight room, you're doing some stuff. Come spring practice, you're putting in some work right there. But then all of a sudden summer comes and you're putting in work in the summer, so that by the time you're hitting August, you're kind of like, you're already running. And this isn't just like all of a sudden people show up in August and win championships in November. That's just not how, or December. That's just not how it is. You can look at any major sport and see, like, I mean, baseball's basically a year-round thing. They start in like January, February on spring practice.
after ending
and they end in
October.
October if they go the length of the thing. You know what I'm saying? So, like, I mean, it's crazy. Basketball is the same thing. They have like summer leagues and things like maybe like.
But you're right. The path towards what the ultimate goal, which in sports, what championships and whatever the goal may be, is it starts way before, and it's way more basic than these like intricate details all the time. It's way more just like, hey, no, it's doing that habit, it's doing that action.
Yeah, and
then
then
it's keeping up with your to-do list and like step-by-step stuff.
There's going to be steps back or like moments or days where it's like, oh no, we didn't necessarily accomplish it how we did, but it's what you do going from that. You know, like perfection is almost.
It's a myth.
Perfection's
a myth.
But even in sports, it's like
it's a myth.
It's. What was it? There was a Kentucky team when we were coming, like, you know, probably over around 10 years ago or something like that, who was undefeated basically all the way until like the last 2 games of the season in the tournament.
That street clothes on their team?
Yeah, street clothes. Anthony Davis.
Sorry, AD.
But they lost in, I think, the Final Four to a Wisconsin team that was like, they had good, Kaminsky and Decker. They had some good guys on their team, but they hadn't lost a game. So there's some times where it's like, yo, even if you're perfect, if you haven't faced adversity by a certain point, all of a sudden when you face it the most, like, how do you respond? Now, okay, there are some outliers or great teams in history where it's like, okay, they push through that. But, I mean, you hardly ever see perfect teams in terms of, like, sports that play a ton of games. So you might see it in football, but, I mean, even then, people see in college football, the Alabamas, the Clemsons, anything like that, and, you know, Ohio State's, and they're like, oh, well, they're just, but you don't see everything that goes in between that and the discipline it takes to be there.
I mean, again, you know, I think we've beaten a dead horse on it to some degree. But, no, yeah, it's all about that. What time you got, Taylor? Perfect. We're done. We got plenty on that.
Okay.
Yeah, that was good. We didn't talk about Peter, though. You want to say something about Peter?
Well, I think the main thing that I want to say when it comes to having faith is to give yourself a little bit of, well, we talked about giving yourself grace, right?
Right.
But I think for the most part what it is according to the scriptures, the same guy, right, who walked on water, the same guy who saw crazy miracles like face to face, when the time came, like, when the time came to
solidify yourself in history as your homeboy.
Exactly. Like, yo, this is the guy I was with. I ain't ashamed of that. This is the guy who's seen a bunch of stuff, like watched it with his own eyes. He denied. 3 times, right? He was like, yo, I don't know that guy. I don't know what you're talking about. And so 2,000 years later, we're expected to have the same faith without seeing what's been seen by this guy. Sorry, yeah, what, John Cena? You know, but the same type of idea is like you're expected to have that same faith without seeing these miracles, without walking on water. And it's like, yo, we got to give ourselves some grace that even the guys who were right next to, according to the scriptures, the Son of God, still had moments of doubt, still had moments of...
They didn't get it.
Well, right. So...
Even when he left, he's like...
That should encourage us in a lot of ways.
For sure.
That even though we're so removed from these, you know, these stories and these scriptures, it doesn't matter. Like, you shouldn't be so worried about having this, like, ironclad faith. Because you're a human being and you're going to have moments where the faith doesn't seem like it's possible.
That's what the grace is for.
But that's the grace. That's what the grace is for. So that's basically what I'm saying is like, give yourself some grace, because the same guy who freaking walked on water was the same guy who was like, I don't know who that guy is. The same guy who looked at this dude while he was walking on water was like, nah, bruh, I don't know who this guy.
Yeah.
You know? So I think that's the main thing.
Keep the faith until you need the grace, man.
Exactly. And I think also and this is another, even just like a biblical reference, but just the whole idea of like, when you feel like you're so far removed and there's no way that you can be loved, that according to the scriptures, even on the ark, Like the cursed serpent was allowed room.
Dang, bro. I could do a whole season on this. You bringing scripture stuff in right at the end. But like, I could do a
I
whole
know,
season.
I'm just saying, like, yo, but even this cursed serpent, even the thing that was like, yo, from the jump was like,
yeah,
cursed.
the whole purpose of Jesus was to bring the margins in.
You got room.
Look at all the stories. Samaritan woman.
Yeah.
He was touching people with leprosy.
Yeah.
Like
I'm just-
freaking tax collectors, Zacchaeus.
That's my main thing.
All
It's
the
like,
whole purpose of Jesus was like, oh, you don't think you belong? You belong.
Sure.
That's the whole point.
So that's really all I
Crazy
wanted to
to
say
say.
about it. But I mean, it's nuts.
I might
mean,
just use that as a blurb. That was cool though.
cool.
Yeah. Awesome.
Sweet.
Good work.
Yeah. Oh. Oh yeah. Hold on. Should we?
No, I don't want to do that. No, I'm kidding.